Okay. Okay. So it's been a while. Um, Wanted to get back into some things here. I had a question or two on some of my older videos, actually. And I wanted to come back to this because I kind of left I want to do two things. One is I left the previous code base off. Obviously a ton has happened since I kind of started this little mini series. I actually took it in a pretty different direction as I started to build out my app X Dividend for iOS. But at the same time, I made some architectural decisions specifically for that app and what kind of products and backend I was using. But how I started the series, kind of going with a very kind of tried and true backend with a SQL database, particularly Postgres. There's a ton of value there, and there's I've actually gotten a lot of questions about it, and so one of the questions here from Cameron Stewart said, "Hey, really enjoying the series. I'm trying to get some basic SQL queries running in Micronaut with Hikari and JDBI. Did I miss that in your videos?" No, Cameron, you did not. I actually, you'll see probably in a video, maybe in a couple of videos from this one, which was back last year, day 5. I actually pivoted away from using SQL for a number of reasons, and I explained that in a later video. But yeah, I'm gonna go back in time. I picked out the closest commit from back at that point. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open source that. I'll put it on my GitHub. And then I'm really considering coming back to that and really picking up where I left off and kind of starting to kind of call it rebuild or build in parallel a version that uses SQL. So in this stream, I'll go through how to do this. So, one, I'll definitely answer your question. And two, in terms of sharing a snippet, I'm going to put this code base up on GitHub, and I'll drop a link here as well at the end of the stream. So let's get into it. As I mentioned, I went back to the closest commit that I could find of this code base. Like I said, it's since really, really, really moved ahead. And so I went back as far as I could, picked out the closest one that I could, and cleaned things up a bit. And we're going to start from here and see where we go. Now, we essentially left off with a working API. It has a simple REST endpoint as well as, two very initial basic GraphQL endpoints. And right now they're just returning static data. They're not using the database at all. But in previous streams prior to the one where the question was asked, I had set up, a Docker Compose setup with the Postgres database and all of that. And this test actually runs all within a Docker container, spins up a real server, connects to the database in the test Docker Compose setup right in here, and runs the tests. So here's hey, run the tests, and then I'll also run a Postgres database next to it. In a future stream, we could easily get rid of this and use something called test containers, which is essentially a way to add an annotation on our test that will literally spin up this Postgres database for me. So we might get to that in a future stream, but for now, right, this is just running a very basic test. If I throw up the server, we can see that we essentially have oops, we got to run our database first. If we spin up our server, we will see that there's only really two endpoints here, right? Accounts and positions. And if we query for this, we will just get the mock data that is coming from here. Okay, so the question was, how do we get access to the database? So this is connecting to a database here, right, via Flyway, JDBI, and Hikari under the hood. If we look at application properties, right, we have that configured, right, JDBC, Postgres, local username and password. It also runs the migrations. So DB migration in the resources folder, right, we create an account table and a transactions table. So that's run at startup. Flyway is enabled. Yeah, that's really all that's relevant there. So we want to connect to that database, and maybe we want to run some queries. So let's take a look at how to do that. First things first, let's go over to the documentation. We can be on latest. It probably really hasn't changed. Let's go down to configuring JDBI. It says Micronaut supports automatically configuring JDBI for convenient idiomatic access to relational data. To add the library, you have to configure it. We've already done that. We've then configured one of our data sources. That's all done. So then what it says is Micronaut will configure the following JDBI beans using JDBI factory. And so in Micronaut, if you're not familiar, there is an annotation called @factory. And what this factory method does is it says that the methods on this class vend out instances, right? It's a factory. It creates instances of the types, right? So you'll see the only method that is on here returns a object of type JDBI. And so we can inject that @JDBI type anywhere in our code base, and we should get an instance of that from the factory, right? So what does that mean? We have two of our fetchers, right? And note, I made some slight adjustments here to how these are, probably in the code base that you were looking at. So just, there's nothing special here, but just kind of be aware of that. So what we need to do is we need to ask for an instance of JDBI. So how do we do that? We just say, we want this thing, okay? So, and again, it's this type org JDBI v3 core, and that's the same type that comes from the factory, right? It's a method called JDBI. So now if we run this, and I will just debug the actual application, and then we'll hit it, we should see a non-null object come back here. Pop open this, and you'll see JDBI, hey, this is an actual instance. So there you go. That's kind of the quick and easy way to get access to the JDBI instance, right? It's annotated as a factory method, JDBI factory. And in fact, let's look at the source of that, right? Because we can look at that JDBI factory, right? So you'll see here, it's a very simple class annotated as a factory. And basically it says, anytime someone asks for JDBI, call this method, and it basically just creates an instance and returns it, okay? So simple as that. And this is a very common thing in Micronaut, is oftentimes when you add one of the core core libraries, it will often create a factory of some type and then give you instances of that. So you just ask for, the instance of whatever you want, and you'll get that back, right? So from here, you can just use JDBI and do whatever you want. I'm going to take this a step further, and let's do a little fun stuff with JDBI. So one of the reasons I like this is because it has a declarative API for your SQL database, right? Let's take a quick look at our account table, ID, name, description, and created at. So let's go ahead and create an accounts DAO or an accounts interface and try to use that from JDBI, right? So that's kind of typically the more, if you're using JDBI, you're probably going to use this type of thing, right? So let's go ahead and do that, because that's probably something that you will want to do. So let's go ahead and create a database package. We're going to create a file, and we're going to call it database tables. Okay, so we're going to create an interface. It's going to be the account table or accounts table. And we're going to do a SQL query. SQL query. It's going to be essentially select star from accounts. Right? So it's just going to return all the accounts. And it's going to return a list of type accounts. Okay, why aren't we getting that? Why don't we get that from our JDBI? Oh, it's because we actually have to pull in the library. Yeah. So just because we pulled this in doesn't mean we actually get the JDBI classes. So, yeah, JDBI 3 core, SQL object extension. Yeah, we got to pull a bunch of these in. Okay. Okay. We are going to pull in org.jdbi dot, no, that colon JDBI 3 core. We'll skip the version for now. Just give me the latest. We also want JDBI 3 SQL object. We want Kotlin, because we need it to map data classes. And we want Kotlin-SQL object. And we want Postgres. I think that should be it. Let's see how that does. Okay. No, we should probably put. I'm a little confused why I didn't download anything. Okay. JDBI 3.20.1. Oops. There we go. Now it's doing some downloading. Okay. All right. So once we pull these in, this should come to us. Exactly. You can set up IntelliJ so that it's such that it resolves this. And I'll just go ahead and show you how to do that. So if you have this set up in databases in IntelliJ, this will actually resolve and you'll get type ahead and stuff. So if your database is running like mine is over here, go ahead and do data source, not Oracle, data source, Postgres, localhost, and name it appropriately, localhost, user, centerboard, password, test connection. Yep. Schemas, do centerboard, right? Apply, and there we go. So this is now open, and if we set Postgres as the default, and this will be centerboard dot it's probably because, yep, got it. Sometimes I get this wrong. You want it to set the database as the one that we are actually working on. Schemas. We want that one. Test. Okay. Does that work? It's centerboard dot public dot. Why doesn't it? No schemas selected. I want all schemas. Why? Centerboard public. Oh, is this because? Let me do all databases. Oh, that's, yeah, public is in there. Tables, accounts, yeah. Accounts, there you go. Okay, cool. All right, so, that shows up, which is nice. All right, so back to JDBI. So this is in here now. We have this running. And so now a couple things to be aware of. Let's go back to here. All right, let's go back and look at the JDBI factory for a second and just check this out. Okay, so a couple things to note. These are all plugins, these things that we added. So SQL object, Kotlin, SQL object. Luckily for us, the factory calls this method call install plugins, which basically looks for all plugins with service loaders found on the class path. So this will automatically, ensure that all of these plugins are available on our JDBI instance, right? So that's just something to note, right? Is that when you add these things, and if you were to create this manually for yourself, right, you would need to install these plugins, right? So this should be all good. We should be able to query for this. Now the question becomes is how do we get an instance of this? So similar to the way that the JDBI factory works, you have a couple of options, but I prefer to essentially just mirror that exact same pattern. And we will say this is going to be a database tables factory. We want a JDBI instance, right? So we're just asking for the JDBI instance from the factory. And then we are going to return the accounts table. And we are going to say JDBI.onDemand accounts table class. Right? So we've just essentially mirrored the same thing that the JDBI factory does, and we're saying, hey, anytime someone wants an accounts table, give them an instance of that injected with the JDBI instance. Okay. So rather here, now let's grab the accounts table and see what we get. And we can actually even query it. Accounts table dot accounts. This should be empty. And hopefully I didn't miss anything or forget anything, but this should work. Nope. Binary version of its metadata. Expected version is just 111. Runtime jar files on the class path should have... Oh, something else is goofed up. Hang on. Okay. So when I pulled in JDBI, things went haywire. Binary version of its metadata. Expected version is just 116. And this is the standard library. First, let's rebuild this. This is definitely a problem. Okay, so this is complaining about the standard library and Kotlin SQL Object 320. So let's see what we got here. We are on version 1.3.7.2 of Kotlin, which is pretty far behind. I think we're on like 1.5 now. Remember, this is a pretty old code base we're bringing up to par. Yeah, okay. So we're gonna bring ourselves up here. Do some quick upgrades here. Okay. Okay, that worked. So we just needed to get ourselves up to date. Let's go ahead and launch the app. We're up and running. We're going to hit the accounts API. Nope. Okay. Make sure the bean is not disabled by requirements. No type accounts table exists. We've got our factory. We need to tell it that this is type prototype, right? Non-singleton scope. Is that right? Every time someone asks for an instance of it. Yeah, that should work. And the reason we need to do that is because we need to tell the factory like what scope it has, right? Okay. So that should fix that, hopefully. Okay. We're just going to ignore that for now. Okay, so accounts is empty. Our accounts table instance is, the one that it gave us. And we have some there. So that's really, kind of the answer to this question. Like I said, I will put this up on GitHub, add the link to this, so people can play around with this. And I need to think think a bit about if I want to kind of get back into this on the SQL side, because I'm way far ahead, and I'm actually at the point where I should probably launch the app here but that's against Firestore and all these other things. So, but there's still a lot of cool stuff to be done here, right? Like I said, this could be switch to use test containers rather than manual Docker compose setup. There's a GraphQL client that we could use, right? There's other stuff that could be done. So, yeah, that's probably it for this this stream here. But again, if you have any other questions, let me know. I will put up some links here shortly. So